What's up, guys? So today's video we're going to be trying to disprove the Mandela effect. There is something that I'm going to try and liken it to sort of within my little argument here, but first, some examples for those of you that don't know. The Mandela effect is basically when a majority of people remember something happening one way, but it actually always was another way. The conspiracy theory behind it goes a little bit deeper to saying that it could be because of a whole multitude of things, and we will get into that. That is part of the argument to disproving it. But yeah, so some examples, for instance, the Monopoly Man. A lot of people remember him wearing a monocle, and in reality, rich Uncle Pennybags never wore a monocle. There's another one here with a lot of people remember Mona Lisa frowning. Whereas she's actually kind of smirking. Her mouth sort of lifts up at the end instead of down. So it's still not a full smile. Mona Lisa is still not smiling. She's just kind of smirking. There's a pretty big one in the Berenstain Bears, where a lot of people remember it being spelled Berenstein, where it's actually Stain. C-3PO is usually remembered as being all gold, but in the original films he actually has one leg is silver from below the knee, and in the prequels we do see TC-14, which is a similar protocol android, is all silver. Potentially it's TC-14's leg. It also means that something happened to C-3PO, who was also in the prequel trilogy. So something happened to him in the gap, and his leg had to be replaced. But yeah, he's got a silver leg from the knee down, kind of how in the sequel trilogy he's got a red arm now as well. And yeah, so there's a couple of examples just to give you an idea of what we're working with here. Now, if I can, alright, so I've got a website here which has two sort of bits on it. Alright, so the first one I'm going to look at is titled The Mandela Effect and How Your Mind is Playing Tricks on You. And it reads, have you ever been convinced that something is a particular way only to discover you've remembered it all wrong? If so, it sounds like you've experienced the phenomenon known as the Mandela Effect. This form of collective misremembering of common events or details first emerged in 2010 when countless people on the internet falsely remembered Nelson Mandela was dead. It was widely believed he died in prison during the 80s. In reality, he was actually freed in 1990 and passed away in 2013, despite some people's claims to remember clips of his funeral on TV, obviously from within the 80s. A paranormal consultant by the name of Fiona Broom coined the term Mandela Effect to explain this collective misremembering, and then other examples started popping up all over the internet. This one again goes into giving us some examples. It also mentions C-3PO, as well as the Queen in Snow White. Instead of saying mirror, mirror on the wall, she actually says magic mirror on the wall, which is hilarious because they actually made a film called Mirror Mirror, which I believe is supposed to evoke the memories of that particular line, which is not a line that actually was in the original Snow White movie anyway. Broom explains the Mandela effect via pseudoscientific theories. She claims the differences arise from movement between parallel realities within the multiverse, and that's based on a theory that within each universe, alternate versions of events and objects exist, which is kind of how, to an extent, how time travel worked in Avengers Endgame. They went back in time, and then if they'd made a different choice, they would end up on this reality. And if they made that choice, etc., etc., and you make branches in time, as Mordo explains it in Doctor Strange. Broom also draws comparisons between the existence Broom also draws comparisons between existence and the holodeck of the USS Enterprise from Star Trek. The holodeck is a virtual reality system which creates recreational experiences. By her explanation, memory errors are software glitches. This is explained as being similar to the film The Matrix. Other theories propose the Mandela effect evidences changes in history caused by time travelers, and this is where my particular theory comes in. If it is time travel, they would the time traveler themselves would experience the butterfly effect, where they would change one small thing, come into the future, and it's vastly different. Whereas we, existing in time, as the universe is sort of pulled apart because of the change into these two timelines, we carry some of our memories from this prime timeline into the second one, and that's what we call the Mandela effect. Similarly, if you imagine sort of a leaf on floating on the surface of some still water, and you throw a rock in, if the rock is the time traveler, they're experiencing dry to wet, two vastly different things, defining their reality, whereas the leaf is still sort of on the surface, but it's now having to deal with these ripples as the tension of the water surface changes. It's the best analogy I can come up with. Then there are claims that distortions result from spiritual attacks linked to Satan, black magic, or witchcraft. But although appealing to many, these theories are not scientifically testable until we invent time travel and discover the multiverse. Where's the science then? Where can we actually prove this? Well, psychologists explain the Mandela effect via memory and social effects, particularly false memory. This invokes mistakenly recalling events or experiences that have not occurred, or distortion of existing memories. The unconscious manufacture of fabricated or misinterpreted memories is called confabulation. In everyday life, it's actually relatively common. False memories occur in a number of ways. For instance, we're getting really into some science here. The Diess, Rudiger, and McDermott paradigm, I hope I'm pronouncing all of those names correctly, demonstrates how learning a list of words that contain closely related items such as bed and pillow produces false recognition of related but not presented words such as sleep. And there are games that will use this exact sort of paradigm as their basis. For instance, when you have a list of words you're not allowed to say, but you've got to get someone to say a particular word, like in Taboo, which is such a fun game. But yeah, when you're not allowed to say a certain number of words in one of these games, and you've got to get them to guess another word, you're kind of flipping this on its head, and you're getting them to guess something from some less loosely related words and phrases. Memory inaccuracy can also arise from what's known as source monitoring errors. These are instances where people fail to distinguish between real and imagined events. US professor of psychology Jim Cohn demonstrated how easily this can happen using the lost in the mall procedure. This saw Cohn give his family members short narratives describing childhood events. One about his brother getting lost in the shopping mall was invented. Not only did Cohn's brother believe the event occurred, but he also added additional detail. When cognitive psychologist and expert on human memory Elizabeth Loftus applied the technique to larger samples, 25% of participants failed to recognize the event was false. So it's pretty common. 1 in 4 people can be convinced that something that did not happen actually happened. And then obviously this is where we're getting into it. The other thing that I was going to link to it, which is probably not going to get brought up here, is mass hysteria. When a large number of people, because we are dealing with a large number of people with the Mandela effect, but when a large number of people sort of have sort of a similar experience. A great example of this, although fictional, is in the movie Shazam, the DC EU film Shazam. Right at the beginning, when Savan is trying to get back into the lair, I guess, of Shazam, the wizard, not the superhero. His associate is interviewing a whole heap of people who she believes she's studying a case of mass hysteria, where they've all seen these like flashing lights and the same symbols have flashed up around them. Just to sort of, so we understand that we are dealing with something that on a number of levels is probably not at all that uncommon. Alright, so when it comes to the Mandela effect, many examples are attributed to so-called schema-driven errors. Schemas are organized packets of knowledge that direct memory. In this way, schemas facilitate understanding of material, but can produce distortion. Frederick Bartlett outlined this process in his 1932 book, Remembering. He read the Canadian folktale War of the Ghosts to participants. He found that listeners omitted unfamiliar details and transformed information to make it more understandable. This process is called effort after meaning and occurs in real-world situations too. For instance, research has previously shown that when participants recall the contents of a psychologist's office, they tend to remember the consistent items such as bookshelves and omit the inconsistent items like a picnic basket. And this is how things become associated with things. Our brain just tries to make connections. Like a psychologist is going to, potentially wear a suit and sit in an office and have bookcases and stuff, right? That's the general gist that we get, and that's just because our brain is trying to process a whole number of things, and remembering what's associated with a psychologist is probably not high on its agenda, so it just sort of packets it together, and there you go, they're all associated now. Schema theory explains why previous research shows that when the majority of participants asked to draw a clock face from memory, they mistakenly draw IV rather than 4 eyes. Now, on this, yes, IV is the correct way to write the Roman numeral 4. You're not supposed to have more than 3 of a particular symbol in a row in writing Roman numerals, but I do distinctly remember my Nan and Pop had a clock that had 4 eyes on it. So if you asked me to draw that clock, I would not be one of the ones mistakenly drawing an IV, because I distinctly remember having 4 eyes, because I remember sitting there at 8 years old going, that should be IV, not 4 eyes. Moving on. Clocks often use 4 eyes because it is more attractive than an IV though. Other examples of the Mandela effect are the mistaken belief that Uncle Pennybags wears a monocle and that the product title Kit Kat contains a hyphen, which it does not. The K's are both capitalized still, but it's one word. There's not even a space between them. It's one word. But this is simply explained by overgeneralization of spelling knowledge, right? You don't just randomly throw a capital letter in the middle of a word like it is here. And with it being kit, like a kit is one word and a cat is another thing. Sure, make them both K's so that it has, so it sticks in memory like that's right, they're both K's. But spelling knowledge would sort of dictate that there's a hyphen in there, and that's how people have remembered that particular one. So, frequently reported errors can then become part of the collective reality, and the internet can reinforce this process by circulating false information, which it does beautifully. For example, simulations of the 1997 Princess Diana car crash are regularly mistaken for real footage, which means that there's someone out there just trying to have a laugh, making up car crash footage for this, or footage for any other sort of televised event that people have maybe remembered wrong, and they're putting it out there as real footage, and people are believing them. In this way, then, the majority of Mandela effects are attributable to memory errors and social misinformation. The fact that a lot of the inaccuracies are trivial suggests they result from selective attention or faulty inference. This is not to say the Mandela effect is not explicable. I don't know why that word was so hard to pronounce. Anyway, but it's not explicable in terms of the multiverse. Indeed, the notion of parallel universes is consistent with the work of quantum physicists, but until the existence of alternate realities is established, psychological theories appear much more plausible. So that one sort of not so much disproves the theory, as it does just sort of say, look, this is more likely. The other one they had is called the Mandela effect and the science of false memories. Sure, this one has a couple of different examples as well, so we're going to try and breeze through this one quickly as well. So obviously, being a new thing, they've got to do their start again. So there's a theory doing the rounds online that nuclear research experiments caused the world to shift into an alternate reality where Donald Trump became president. Now look, you could say that this alternate reality is also the only one that has coronavirus and murder wasps and whatever else 2020's thrown at us, okay? You might also be like, well, hey, if the world ended in 2012 and the years since just seem to be getting progressively worse, is that just our particular timeline disintegrating? Maybe it is. But until such time as the world ends, we will act as if it intends to spin on. Comment below if you've understood that reference. Wow, 2 references in the one. Nailed it. And so while that theory that the nuclear research created a branch reality that we live in now where Donald Trump's become president might sound stupid, some people genuinely believe it to be true. I mean, hey, look, I'm open to possibilities. That could be a thing, right? In another one, that nuclear research might have created the Hulk instead. We don't know. Right, and so to back up this theory, they cite the Mandela effect, a phenomenon that supposedly occurs when large groups of people believe something happened even though evidence shows it isn't true, despite the fact that a branch reality being caused that we live in, and I'm pretty sure at this point in time we're all aware Donald Trump is president of the United States. So that's not something people are going to falsely remember in like 20 years time. They're going to be like, oh yeah, remember that time that Hillary Clinton was president after Barack Obama? That's not something people are going to falsely remember. But when we consider that Mandela effect could be a multiverse thing, kind of almost touches the sides. The name of the theory dates back to 2010. We've already been through this. Psychologists say these collective misrememberings can be mostly put down to memory distortions and what's known as the misinformation effect. This is where information you learn after an event can interfere with the way you recall it. For instance, it's like watching a film for the first time, and you might have a couple of characters that sort of sit in a grey area during the film, and then at the end you find out that, you know, this guy's a good guy, that guy's a bad guy, and whatever, right? And then when you rewatch it, suddenly there's no grey area characters, because you know that guy's going to be the villain, that guy's going to end up helping the hero, sort of thing. And you can then sort of overlay that knowledge of what's happening to understand that, oh, okay, he's doing that because that's going to help him achieve this plan, and he's trying to stop him because he's going to end up joining them, or whatever it might be. For instance, so in the case of Mandela's death, the passing of Steve Biko, another prominent South American anti-apartheid activist who died around this time, possibly caused this misperception. Obviously, when Mandela became the Prime Minister, I don't know the exact term, but he became the leader of South Africa. So that's probably when people were like, oh, okay, well, his name is kind of really well known. Maybe he was I don't know. Anyway, but this does say that yes, you do probably remember some footage of a well-known anti-apartheid South African activist that died in the 80s, but it wasn't Mandela. Despite psychologists explaining why such misrememberings happen, some people claim these differences arise from the movement between parallel realities, which cause us to remember things incorrectly. This is based on the theory that within each universe, alternate versions of events and objects exist. Right? We're Schrodinger's cat. We both exist and don't. Right? And because we're in the box, observing ourselves in the box, we can only sort of, we can't be the outside observer, because we're the ones in the box. We are the cat. Until we discover other universes, where in those cases we would be the outside observer, observing those universes. But until such a time, we are the cat, not Schrodinger. Numerous examples of the Mandela effect continue to pop up all over the internet, with many people adamant that their memories are correct. Below are 3 classic examples. Honestly, I sort of saw the first 2, and I didn't even know these were Mandela effects. So we're both gonna learn something today. But yeah, below are 3 classic examples of the Mandela effect. We've debunked. Now they've spelt mandala as in like the cool little flowery Indian designs that a lot of colouring books have in them, instead of Mandela, which is obviously Nelson Mandela's last name. The only difference is the vowel, the second vowel. So the first example we've got here. When looking at the Ford logo, most people don't recall or notice the flourish at the end of the F. Some people claim this embellishment was not there originally and has been added. This is despite the fact that the additional loop has been part of the Ford logo since the early 1900s. Now they're talking about the little cross bar, like in the middle of the F, sort of does this little loop. So the top has like a little flourish. Your vertical line has a little flourish, and then the little one that goes across has a little loop on it. They're talking about the little loop here. Explanation of this is that this occurs because our previous experiences shape our expectations of how things should look. So if we presume something to be a certain way, this is most likely how we will remember it. In the case of the Ford logo, most Fs we see in the world are without the embellishment, so noticing the curl is surprising. The other thing too is that it could just be that the Ford logo is actually based on how Ford himself signed his name. Maybe he, in order to, make his signature different to anyone else whose name was also Ford, put that little embellishment in there, and that's what's become the logo. As the theory. Right, I'm probably pretty close to the truth though, let's be honest. The JFK assassination, just what we want to talk about. Death of the president. Mandela effects also arise when we jump to conclusions without properly looking at historical material. People frequently say the number of people in the limousine at the assassination of US President John F. Kennedy has altered because of the movement between parallel realities. And indeed, there is a common misconception there were 4 passengers, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, but the car actually contained 6 people. The driver, Secret Service agents Bill Greer and Roy Kellerman, Texas Governor John Connally, the First Lady of Texas, Nellie Connolly, Six people. Driver, 2 Secret Service agents, Texas Governor, First Lady, President John F. Kennedy, and Jackie Kennedy. You need to count because that's 7. That's not 6. Despite the fact that, unless the driver's one of the Secret Service agents, which I mean is likely, but they've got it listed here as a separate person. We're just going to assume that one of the agents is the driver. The driver is not a separate person. That gives us our 6. 2 Secret Servicemen, the Texas Governor and his wife, the President and his wife. So the explanation for this one is that the perception that passenger numbers have changed is attributable to photographs and film taken from different angles and ignorance of the car's design. The limousine has 2 auxiliary jump seats which remained in position when the car housed additional people, so the car could seat 4 or 6 passengers. What this sort of saying is that it's got its front seat with the driver and a front passenger seat, and then 2 rows of seats, kind of like what a minivan would have these days. Right, so the agents are in the front seat, and then the partition often obscured the front view, 2 passengers from view. So yeah, so they're sitting in the front, there's a little partition there, and certain angles would have, probably because of the camera quality that they had at the time, and glare off the windscreen, or whatever, would have obscured these 2 people from being in it. And the last one that this one gives is Forrest Gump. Yes, the movie has a Mandela effect in it. If you've ever watched the film Forrest Gump, chances are you remember the famous line about a box of chocolates. Most people seem to recall the line as life is like a box of chocolates, but in reality, in the film, Tom Hanks actually says life was like a box of chocolates. Supporters claim this is evidence that we have entered a time shift, with our memories glitching and recalling different versions from other parallel universes. The truth is both versions of the line exist. Promotional material included the more familiar is phrase, while the film version actually includes the was version. The contradiction arises from the fact that people are unaware that different versions exist. Ultimately, the Mandela effect exists because the internet is a powerful tool for spreading misinformation and people will engage with material because of interest and intrigue rather than concerns about accuracy and authenticity, as can be seen with the rise of fake news and disinformation. Done. With those two, we can sort of give ourselves more scientifically accurate explanations of what's probably going on until such a time as we discover a new universe. So yeah, until such a time, the Mandela effect can just be disproven as mass false memory. That's all it is, because our brains work in particular ways, and trying to comprehend something that the brain is not really wired to comprehend in the way that it probably happened, it's going to try and create an alternate route, and that's what you're going to remember. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos from me, and the notification bell if you want to be notified when I upload new ones. Again, links in the description down below. And yeah, again, comment if you understood my references. See if you can guess where they're from. But yeah, until next time, guys, keep your head screwed on.